The NFL is supposed to be the ultimate proving ground, the place where legends are born, where only the toughest and most talented survive. But what happens when the system that claims to reward merit suddenly looks like it's playing by a different set of rules? What happens when two young players, carrying one of the most famous last names in football history, are treated like outsiders instead of rising stars? That's exactly the situation unfolding right now with Shiloh and Shedeur Sanders, the sons of none other than Coach Prime himself, Deion Sanders. And the way the league is handling their careers has fans and insiders asking some very uncomfortable questions. Let's start with the headlines. Shiloh Sanders, released by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after a preseason incident that had social media buzzing. On paper, it looked simple. Get into a heated moment, throw a shove, get ejected, and suddenly you're off the roster. But here's the problem. That narrative doesn't add up. NFL teams have looked the other way for far worse infractions when they truly believe in a player's potential. So why was Shiloh cut so quickly? Was it really discipline or something much more strategic? And then there's Shadur. If you only glanced at the box score from his second preseason game, you might think he looked shaky, overwhelmed, not ready for the big stage. That's what critics want you to believe. But if you actually watched the game, you saw something very different. You saw a rookie quarterback running for his life behind a patchwork offensive line. You saw receivers failing to make basic catches. And yet, in those rare moments when Shadur had time, you saw flashes of the accuracy that made him one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football. One dropped pass, one small moment that could have flipped the entire story, and suddenly we'd be having a very different conversation about his NFL debut. Now, here's where things get even more explosive. Enter Coach Prime. When reporters tried to corner him about his son's struggles, he didn't dodge, he didn't make excuses. He looked the league dead in the eye and said, "My kids are ready for anything. With or without football, they're going to be straight." On the surface, it sounded like a father defending his boys. But beneath the surface, it was something far more dangerous, a warning shot. A reminder that the Sanders family doesn't need the NFL nearly as much as the NFL needs them. Because let's be honest, this isn't just about football anymore. This is about branding, influence, and power. Shiloh and Shadur aren't just athletes. They're cultural figures with millions of followers, built-in fan bases, and the kind of charisma that sells tickets, merchandise, and media deals. They're part of an empire Coach Prime has been building for decades. And that empire isn't at the mercy of the league. So the real question is this: is the NFL giving the Sanders brothers a fair chance to prove themselves? Or are we watching the league try to humble a family that refuses to play by its unwritten rules? When news first broke that Shiloh Sanders had been released by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it sounded like just another NFL roster move. Players get cut all the time in the preseason. It's brutal, it's heartbreaking, but it's also routine. Yet the moment Shiloh's name appeared on that transaction list, the story started spreading like wildfire. Why? Because this wasn't just another player. This was Deion Sanders' son. And when the son of Coach Prime gets cut, people want answers. The initial explanation was simple: Shiloh's ejection in the final preseason game. Cameras caught the confrontation, the shove, the whistle, and the walk to the locker room. Social media immediately painted him as reckless, undisciplined, a player who couldn't control his emotions. For critics, that clip became the entire story. But if you've been around the NFL long enough, you know that's not how these decisions work. Teams don't cut promising young players just because of one heated moment. Veterans have thrown punches in games, committed personal fouls, even caused full-on brawls, and still kept their jobs the next day. So why was Shiloh's situation different? Here's the truth most people missed: timing. Look closely at when Tampa Bay made the move. They didn't wait until final roster cuts, when hundreds of names flood the waiver wire and it's nearly impossible to keep track of who's available. They cut him early, almost as if they wanted him to slide under the radar. To NFL insiders, that's a classic strategy. Release a young player before the market gets crowded, and you have a much better chance of sneaking him back onto the practice squad without another team swooping in. In other words, what looked like punishment may have actually been protection. But the problem is perception. Once a player's release is tied to discipline, it sticks to their name. Suddenly, coaches on other teams aren't seeing a hungry, talented safety. They're seeing the guy who got tossed in preseason. Labels spread fast in the NFL, and they're hard to shake. That's what makes this situation so frustrating. Shiloh's intensity, the very thing that got him told to slow down in practice, is the same intensity teams usually beg for in young players. The same fire that coaches say they want on their defense, yet instead of being framed as competitiveness, it's being spun as immaturity. And this is where the Sanders name cuts both ways. On one hand, it guarantees attention, opportunities, and headlines. On the other hand, it magnifies every mistake, every misstep, every outburst. If any other rookie safety had the exact same preseason, we probably wouldn't even be talking about it. But because this is Shiloh Sanders, every detail becomes a national story. That's why his release can't just be written off as business as usual. There's a bigger game being played here, and Shiloh may be caught in the middle of it. But as we'll see, what really turned this situation into a firestorm wasn't the release itself, it was the way his father responded. The release of Shiloh Sanders could have been just another forgettable roster move, if not for the way his father responded. When reporters brought up the cuts and questioned whether his sons were built for the NFL, Deion Sanders didn't hesitate. He leaned in, spoke with calm authority, and dropped a message that sent shockwaves through the league. "I'm proud of my kids, all of them," he said. "And I prepared my kids for any and everything that could possibly happen in life and in sports. That's part of fathering, that's part of parenting, that's part of having a relationship. They're going to be straight, with or without football." On the surface, it sounds like a dad doing what any father would do, standing up for his children, protecting their reputation, and reminding the world that football isn't everything. But if you know Deion Sanders, you know there's always more beneath the surface. This wasn't just fatherly pride, this was a carefully calculated statement, a layered response designed to do more than silence critics. Think about it. In one sentence, Coach Prime managed to do 3 things at once. First, he reassured his sons publicly, letting them know that no matter what the headlines say, he believes in them. Second, he sent a subtle reminder to NFL teams that the Sanders family isn't desperate for validation. And third, he fired a warning shot at the league itself. Don't think you can control this family's narrative. That's vintage Prime. He's been navigating media pressure and league politics since his own playing days. Back then, he built a brand around swagger, confidence, and unapologetic individuality. Today, he's using that same playbook to protect his sons. When he says, "They'll be straight with or without football," it's not just reassurance, it's leverage. He's telling the NFL, "You need us more than we need you." And here's why that's so powerful. Most young players enter the league with no backup plan. Their entire future depends on making a roster. One cut, one injury, one bad headline can end everything. But the Sanders family is different. Shiloh and Shadur already have millions of followers, endorsement deals, NIL money, and opportunities far beyond the football field. They've been building their platform since day one, and Deion has made sure of it. That means they can't be easily broken by the threat of being cut. They're bigger than the league. For NFL executives, that's a dangerous dynamic. A family that doesn't fear the system can't be controlled by it, and that's exactly why Deion's response carried so much weight. It wasn't just a defense of his sons, it was a declaration of independence. A way of saying, the Sanders legacy doesn't live or die on your terms. And yet, this is where the story takes a turn. Because while Prime was sending a message of strength and confidence, the reality is that both Shiloh and Shadur still love this game. Football is their passion, their dream, and their chosen path, which makes the NFL's treatment of them not just business, but deeply personal. When Deion Sanders said his kids would be straight with or without football, he wasn't bluffing, because let's be honest, the Sanders family has already built an empire that stretches far beyond the gridiron. To understand why Coach Prime's words carried so much weight, you've got to look at the foundation this family has been laying for years. Start with the name itself. Sanders isn't just a last name, it's a brand. Deion created it during his playing days, when primetime became more than just a nickname. It became a movement. He was larger than life, the rare athlete who transcended sports, merging football, baseball, fashion, and entertainment into one unstoppable persona. That blueprint didn't just inspire fans, it became a playbook for his kids. Shadur and Shiloh grew up not only around greatness, but also around marketing genius. While most young athletes are focused only on training, these two were also learning how to build a platform, how to connect with fans, and how to create value beyond their stats. By the time NIL deals exploded onto the college scene, they were already positioned as natural stars. Shadur has millions of followers across social media, while Shiloh's charisma and personality make him a magnet for attention. They weren't just athletes. They were influencers before the term became mainstream. Hollywood? That's already on the table. Brands? They've got plenty. Content creation? Both brothers have fan bases that treat every clip, every vlog, every highlight like must-see TV. And let's not forget, they've been raised by one of the greatest self-promoters in sports history. Prime knows how to turn opportunity into legacy, and he's been grooming his sons to do the same. That's why when people say, well, what if the NFL doesn't work out for them? It almost sounds ridiculous. Of course, football is their passion. Of course, they've dedicated their lives to it. But if the NFL slams the door, there are 10 more windows already open. Streaming deals, brand partnerships, reality TV, fashion lines, you name it, the Sanders boys have the reach to make it happen. And that's exactly what makes the NFL nervous. Because athletes with real leverage, athletes who don't need the league to validate them, are harder to control. Normally, when a player gets cut, they're scrambling to prove themselves, desperate for another chance. But if Shiloh or Shadur get cut, they pivot into a new lane, keep building their empire, and bring their millions of fans along with them. That's influence the league can't ignore. But here's the irony. Even with all these options, with all this built-in success, their passion still circles back to football. It's not about the money, it's not about the fame, it's about the game they've loved since childhood, which makes the NFL's treatment of them even more questionable. Why make life harder for players who don't even need your system? Why risk being the league that pushed away two of the most marketable athletes of their generation? And that's where this saga shifts, because if the Sanders family is already an empire, the NFL should be treating them like assets. Instead, it feels like the league is testing them, pushing them, almost daring them to walk away. The NFL is a dream factory, but it's also a machine that chews up players and spits them out without a second thought. For every superstar who becomes a household name, there are hundreds of others who vanish overnight, and this isn't just by accident, it's by design. The league thrives on constant turnover, on keeping fresh talent cycling through while quietly discarding the players who no longer fit its narrative. That's the reality Shiloh just walked into. One day, you're fighting for a roster spot. The next day, you're cut, and it barely even makes a headline. To the outside world, it looks like business as usual. But inside, it feels ruthless, almost cold. Because the NFL doesn't see players as people, it sees them as investments, assets to be maximized, contracts to be controlled, and when the time is up, disposed of like yesterday's news. This is where the story gets darker. Fans love to believe the NFL is all about merit, that the best players always rise to the top. But that's not always the case. Behind the scenes, it's about politics, money, and perception. Roster decisions aren't just about talent, they're about contracts, about avoiding media distractions, about which players fit into the image the team wants to sell. And if you don't align perfectly with that agenda, your chances shrink no matter how much skill you bring to the table. Now imagine walking into that system as a Sanders. You're not just another athlete, you're the son of Coach Prime, one of the loudest, most polarizing voices in sports. That means you carry not only your own name but also the weight and sometimes the baggage of his. For some NFL executives, that's a gift. For others, it's a liability. They don't just see Shiloh or Shadur, they see the media circus that might follow them. And the NFL, for all its glitz, has always been cautious about losing control of the narrative. That's why the league's ruthless side hits even harder here, because cutting a Sanders isn't just about roster space, it's about sending a message. A reminder that no matter who your father is, no matter how much fame you bring, the shield comes first. The NFL has built its empire on discipline and hierarchy, and it won't let even the brightest stars step outside of its system without consequence. And here's the twist. The same machine that tries to silence individuality also depends on it. The NFL thrives when larger-than-life personalities drive ratings, sell jerseys, and fill stadiums. But once those personalities start looking bigger than the league itself, that's when the machine sharpens its teeth. This is the paradox facing the Sanders family. They're too valuable to ignore, but too independent to fully control. And in a league where power always tips toward the owners, the NFL isn't afraid to play hardball. But this story is far from over, because while the NFL might have the power to cut a player, it doesn't have the power to erase a movement. And the Sanders name? That's not just a headline, it's a legacy. When Shedeur Sanders finally stepped onto the field for his first taste of NFL preseason action, the expectations were sky high. Fans were buzzing, analysts were watching closely, and every throw he made was dissected in real time. But instead of a highlight reel debut, what we saw was something very different: hesitation, pressure, and plays that didn't quite click. At least, that's how the narrative was spun. On paper, Shedur's performance looked shaky. He faced pressure almost instantly on most snaps, the pocket collapsing before he had a chance to make his reads. He overthrew a receiver here, took a sack there, and by the end of the game, critics were already lining up to say he wasn't ready for the big stage. But here's the question: was this really about his struggles, or was it about something bigger? Because if you watched closely, something felt off. The offensive line looked unusually weak during his reps, almost as if protection was an afterthought. Receivers dropped passes they normally catch. Play calls felt vanilla, predictable, and uninspired, giving defenses easy opportunities to swarm. It didn't look like the coaches were putting him in a position to succeed. It looked like they were testing him, maybe even setting him up to fail. And this is where the speculation begins. The NFL is notorious for hazing rookies, especially those who come in with hype. It's almost like a rite of passage: prove you can survive the fire or burn out trying. But with Shadur, it felt heavier. Remember, this isn't just any rookie. This is Deion Sanders' son. The spotlight was brighter, the criticism louder, and the stakes much higher. Was the league trying to humble him early? To remind him, and by extension Coach Prime, that no one gets special treatment? Fans started asking the same thing online. Social media lit up with side-by-side comparisons, other rookie quarterbacks being given safer playbooks, stronger protection, and more support. Meanwhile, Shadur seemed to be left on an island. Some even claimed it was intentional sabotage, designed to keep him from looking like the superstar many expected. After all, if he came out dominating from day one, it would fuel the Sanders narrative even more, a narrative the league isn't entirely comfortable with. But here's what makes it more interesting. Even through the struggles, Shadur showed flashes. A perfectly placed deep ball under pressure. Quick decisions when given even a sliver of time. Poise that you don't often see in rookies, even when everything around him was breaking down. Those moments hinted at something undeniable. He has the tools, he has the confidence, and he has the potential to silence the doubters. The real question is, will he be given a fair chance to show it? Or will the preseason narrative that Shadur isn't ready stick to him like glue, shaping how coaches and executives view him moving forward? Because sometimes in the NFL, perception becomes reality. And if this was a setup, then Shadur is already fighting a battle far bigger than just football. Every time Shadur or Shiloh Sanders steps onto the field, the conversation goes beyond football. It's not just about their performance, it's about their last name. And that's where the controversy gets messy. Because while some argue the Sanders brothers are benefiting from nepotism, others believe they're actually being singled out and targeted more harshly than anyone else. Let's start with the nepotism argument. Critics point out that having Deion Sanders as your father opens doors most athletes could only dream of. Scouts pay closer attention. Media gives extra coverage. Opportunities seem to line up quicker. To the skeptics, the Sanders name is a fast pass into the spotlight, one that creates an uneven playing field. They argue that plenty of talented players don't get half the attention Shadur or Shiloh receive, simply because they weren't born into football royalty. And in a league where thousands fight for a shot, that kind of advantage sparks resentment. But here's where the flip side kicks in. Nepotism may get you noticed, but it doesn't guarantee success. In fact, it can paint a target on your back. For every person cheering you on, there are just as many waiting for you to fail, ready to dismiss your accomplishments as the product of privilege rather than hard work. And for Shadur and Shiloh, that target feels especially heavy. Every interception, every dropped pass, every mistake is magnified and tied to the idea that they're only here because of their father. And then there's the possibility that the NFL itself plays into this narrative. Being Deion's sons comes with added baggage. Coach Prime is loud, unapologetic, and never afraid to call out the system. He challenges traditions, disrupts the status quo, and commands the spotlight in ways the league can't always control. To some executives, bringing in his sons doesn't just mean adding talent, it means inviting his influence into the locker room. And not every organization is eager to deal with that. That's why many believe the Sanders brothers are being judged more harshly than other players. It's not just about proving they belong, it's about proving they belong despite their name. That's a heavier standard than most rookies face. A normal player can grow through mistakes, but for Shadur and Shiloh, one bad outing fuels the narrative that they're overrated, products of nepotism, and undeserving of their spots. So, which is it? Nepotism or targeting? The truth might be somewhere in between. Yes, the Sanders name opens doors, but it also puts a spotlight on them so intense that even the smallest flaws look massive. And in the NFL, perception often matters more than reality. That's the deeper issue here. The brothers aren't just fighting defensive lines on the field, they're fighting narratives off it. Narratives that could either push them into superstardom or crush them before they've even had a chance to prove themselves. When people talk about Deion Sanders' Coach Prime, they usually focus on his charisma, his confidence, and his larger-than-life presence. But what often gets overlooked is the leverage he quietly holds over the NFL, leverage that few coaches, analysts, or even former legends can claim. And in the case of his sons, that leverage may be one of the most important factors shaping how their stories unfold. First, there's the obvious. Prime is a Hall of Famer who left an undeniable stamp on the league. He wasn't just good, he was transformational. Two-time Super Bowl champion, one of the greatest cornerbacks to ever play, and a cultural icon who made defense glamorous. That legacy alone means the NFL will always have to listen when he speaks. His voice carries weight, and he knows it. But leverage goes beyond past accolades. What really makes Coach Prime powerful today is his role as a cultural force outside the NFL. He's not just coaching college football, he's reshaping it. At Jackson State and then Colorado, he brought an unprecedented spotlight to programs that were otherwise overlooked. Recruits follow him, media follows him. Millions of fans tune in just because his name is attached. That kind of influence doesn't stop at the college level, it bleeds into the NFL too. And here's the key. Prime knows how to use that influence. When the league treats his sons or any player unfairly, he has the platform to call it out publicly. He doesn't need NFL Network or ESPN to carry his message. He has millions of followers, a direct line to fans, and the ability to control the narrative in real time. That makes him a problem for the league if they try to box his sons into a corner. They can't just quietly bury Shadur on the depth chart or dismiss Shiloh without pushback, because Coach Prime will shine a spotlight on it, turning it into a national story. But there's another angle too, opportunity. NFL teams know that drafting or signing one of Deion's sons isn't just about talent, it's about tapping into his brand. Imagine the headlines, the ticket sales, the merchandise. Bringing in Shadur or Shiloh isn't just a football move, it's a business move. And in a league where money talks, that's serious leverage. Of course, this leverage cuts both ways. Some executives see it as a headache. They don't want Prime's presence overshadowing the team or questioning decisions. But others see it as gold, a chance to connect with a younger, more engaged fan base and to bring the spotlight onto their franchise. And that puts the NFL in a tricky position. Because, like it or not, Coach Prime isn't just a former legend anymore. He's a brand, a movement, and a megaphone that the league can't ignore. And as long as his sons are chasing their NFL dreams, that leverage will loom over every decision made about them. The big question hanging over the Sanders family right now isn't just about where Shadur and Shiloh land in the NFL. It's about whether their future even needs the league at all. Because as much as the NFL is the ultimate dream for countless athletes, the Sanders family operates differently. They've always played by their own rules. And they've built something powerful enough to challenge the traditional path. Let's start with Shadur. If he breaks through and finds success in the NFL, it would silence doubters and cement his place as more than just Coach Prime's son. But even if the league continues to doubt him, Shadur doesn't lose everything. He's already built his own brand, with millions of followers, sponsorship deals, and a massive presence online. In today's world, athletes don't need the NFL to be stars. They need an audience, and Shadur already has one. Shiloh's path may look different, but it follows the same idea. His release may sting, but it doesn't end his story. Between his connections, his father's backing, and the fan base he's already built, Shiloh can pivot into countless opportunities. Whether it's media, coaching, or building his own ventures, the NFL no longer holds total control over what a football player becomes after college. And this is where the Sanders family as a whole comes in. Together, they've built an empire that stretches beyond the field. Coach Prime isn't just a coach, he's a brand that commands attention in sports, culture, and business. Shedeur, Shiloh, and their siblings aren't just athletes, they're personalities with platforms. That means their future doesn't live or die with the NFL. If anything, the NFL may need them more than they need it. The bigger picture is this. The Sanders family is rewriting the rules of what it means to be a sports dynasty. Traditionally, families like the Mannings or the Watts carved their legacies strictly inside the NFL. But the Sanders are showing that in today's media-driven world, power comes from influence, not just contracts. If the league embraces them, it could mean a new wave of excitement and cultural relevance. If the league resists them, the Sanders can still thrive outside its walls, possibly even pulling some of the spotlight away from the NFL itself. So the future is wide open. Maybe Shadur rises as an NFL star, maybe Shiloh finds his lane elsewhere, or maybe both brothers carve paths that prove the game has changed. Either way, the Sanders name isn't going away anytime soon. Because whether the NFL wants them or not, the Sanders family has built something bigger than the game, and their story is still being written with or without the league's blessing. The Sanders saga isn't just another sports story, it's a glimpse into how much the game has changed, and how much it's still struggling to change. On the surface, it looks like the tale of two brothers, Shiloh, battling to find his footing, and Shadur, trying to prove he's more than just a name. But underneath, it's about legacy, power, and the clash between tradition and disruption. For decades, the NFL has been the ultimate gatekeeper. If you wanted fame, fortune, and football glory, you had no choice but to go through the league system. But the Sanders family is showing that those rules don't apply in the same way anymore. With their platform, their following, and their ability to turn every headline into a cultural moment, they've proven they don't need the NFL to stay relevant. If anything, the NFL might need them more than they realize. Shiloh's release could have been the end of the story, but instead, it sparked conversations about fairness, targeting, and whether the NFL still knows how to handle players with massive off-the-field influence. Shedur's preseason struggles could have been dismissed as growing pains, but in the shadow of Coach Prime, even small moments turn into national debates. This is the power of the Sanders brand. Nothing they do happens quietly. And then there's Coach Prime himself. His presence looms over every decision, every narrative, every judgment passed on his sons. Some see him as a protective father, others as an overbearing shadow. But no matter the angle, his influence is undeniable. He's not just raising athletes, he's building an empire that challenges how the sports world operates. So what happens next? That's the million-dollar question. Maybe Shadur rises and silences every critic with a breakout performance. Maybe Shiloh pivots and shows the world he was never defined by a roster spot. Or maybe, just maybe, the Sanders family proves once and for all that success doesn't have to come with the NFL's stamp of approval. One thing is certain, the Sanders name isn't going away. It's not just tied to the past glory of Deion's Hall of Fame career. It's tied to the future of how athletes build brands, control their narratives, and redefine what success looks like. The NFL may embrace that shift or fight against it, but either way, the story continues. And that's what makes this so fascinating, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about football. It's about family, power, and the courage to challenge a system that's been untouchable for decades. The Sanders family has already proven they know how to win on the field. Now, they're out to prove they can win off it too. So, whether it's under the bright lights of the NFL or beyond its reach, one truth remains. The Sanders legacy is far from finished. In fact, it's only just beginning. If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.